Hey everyone, Davey here. Time for another review of a movie about me.
No, bats.
What?
It's
What are you talking
Dracula. It's about Dracula.
What? Of course it's me. It's Batman.
It's a new origin story. It's about Dracula.
No. This guy controls bats. Did you not see Batman Begins?
Yes,
I controlled
did.
bats.
I did see it. Yeah.
Well then what the fuck?
Hey everyone, Davey here with another movie review. It is the month of October, so we got all these Halloween-themed movies coming out, whether they be horror or movies like this, the reimagining of one of Universal's famous iconic monsters, Dracula. And for this instance, it's called Dracula Untold. I always feel weird saying the title for this movie because, I don't know, there's just something about it that rings off the tongue in just an awkward way. Dracula Untold. Untold, unsaid. And like the title implies, this is a new version of Dracula. This isn't your grandfather's Dracula, blah blah. This is an edgier Dracula for the new cool kids. A PG-13 Dracula without any of the gore or blood or any of the stuff that really made Dracula edgier from the beginning, from the 90s with Francis Ford Coppola's version. But in this version, you got Luke Evans playing the titular character who is actually known as Vlad the Impaler, pre-Dracula transformation. And it tells the tale of this man who is the leader of this city that comes under the oppression of the Turks, which are this army that used to attack them, but now they kind of settled upon a treaty, but when they think that, you know, something went wrong in that treaty, the leader of the Turks, played by Dominic Cooper, decides to recruit young boys, 1,000 young boys from Vlad's city, and he's just not going to have this. So in order to protect his family from this kind of oppression, he goes to desperate supernatural means to do so. Now, for most people like myself, I found the telling of Dracula this time around to be quite original. There were several parts of the story that I found very interesting, original, and things that I haven't really seen before. But other people, mainly hardcore gamers, are gonna take this story and liken it to that of a game that came out recently, I believe, called Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2, and I knew about that game, but I didn't know about the story for that game. So I'm not gonna say that I've played it and, oh yeah, I found it very familiar, but from what I've heard, it is the similar type of story. But for me, I found this iteration of Dracula much more intriguing. There's several things in the story that I found quite interesting, especially the one of how this character felt more sympathetic because he wants to protect his family from this other army. So I think that added a new dimension to the character, and I found that immensely interesting to see how bad he really wants to save his people, let alone his family, his wife and his son. So I found that aspect of the movie, as well as the story, very interesting. Sadly, there were other aspects that at first get presented and I'm like, ooh, this is going to be kind of interesting, but then in the middle, not only does the movie lose a little bit of steam, but they kind of, it's almost like the writers and the producers, and the director subsequently, push the fast forward button so that they can get to like the cool vampire stuff, because there's this segment in the middle where they just skip over something that could have been interesting and made the character of Dracula much more tragic, and that is his own people turning against him when they realize that maybe this guy is like not even of this earth anymore. I think that would have added a whole lot more to the character, but it's literally done in like 5 minutes. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? But fortunately they make up for that by just getting to some of the cooler things about this iteration of Dracula, which again is one of the things that I really loved about this movie, is that there were certain aesthetic choices they made for the character of Dracula that I really liked, whether it be the way they told the story or just some cool stuff that they gave Dracula. He is more of a superhero in this movie rather than the, you know, the count that you've seen in other versions of Dracula. Here, he's a superhero. Okay, he's legitimately a superhero. He's like Batman if Batman actually had the powers that his animal can do, which is like to fly around and to have eyesight without the gadgetry. He's practically that, essentially that character. And seeing him learn these powers, and sure, it's like done in a span of 5 minutes, but I could do with that. I can do with breezing over him realizing his powers. But I also wouldn't have minded a little bit of like, I don't want to say a training montage, but a segment where he practices rather than just right away go and try to defeat this whole entire army by himself. But seeing him pull off these powers, rather cool. There were several things that he was doing, and I'm like, this is rather nice. And another aspect is that besides the supernatural powers that he's able to do, some of the other fight scenes are also choreographed very well. They're very visceral. Sure, it's PG-13, so you're not going to see an awful lot of blood, but they're really visceral fights. Except for one particular shot that was early on in the movie, and it's a shame that there weren't any more shots like this throughout the rest of the movie. But when this shot happened, I'm like, this is PG-13? But like I said, some other aesthetic choices I really liked. A good prime example is the first 10 or 15 minutes. The movie opens with a traditional opening narration over a sequence that looked rather cool. I really liked how they demonstrated this opening scene. But what I liked the most about it was the fact that it only gave us information about the character, but not everything. And to better demonstrate this, I'll say that the next 10 minutes after this opening little montage with the narration could have easily been compressed and shoved right into that opening narration. They could have easily done that, but they didn't. Instead, they showed it to us. They didn't just tell us, they showed it to us. That's something that I really appreciated about this movie, and other movies hardly ever do. And who I also appreciated was our main lead actor, Luke Evans, who I always seen in the background. He's mainly known for Bard in the Hobbit movies, and I think he was in the most recent Fast and Furious movie as the villain. But I always looked at him as the kind of actor that maybe, I want to see what he can do as the lead actor. See if he can carry a movie. And after seeing this, I believe he can. I really did feel for the character. He made me care about him. I mean, it's not an Oscar-worthy performance, but he did make me give a damn about the character. Unfortunately, I can't say the same thing for almost any of the supporting actors because everybody is just so two-dimensional and bland that I really didn't care. Even the family, I just didn't really care about them. I understood why the main character cared about him, and that's why I appreciate Luke Evans, but they were expendable to me. And the double goes for our main villain here, played by Dominic Hooper. He was just so bland. And it's Dominic Hooper, which makes me feel even worse about it, because I know for a fact this guy can act. I've seen The Devil's Double. He was amazing in that, and he's a really good Howard Stark in the Marvel movies, and soon to be a TV show, Agent Carter, which has just recently been confirmed to be in. I know he can be a good actor, but throughout this whole year, he's like, oh, I gotta pay these bills. Generic bad guy? Sign me up. First with Need for Speed, and now this. I mean, the master vampire that was lurking in the cave, he was more menacing and 1,000 times more interesting than he was. Speaking of which, that scene where we first get introduced to that master vampire that's in the cave, genuinely creepy. There's some cool imagery there, which this movie has an awful lot about. It's another one of the aesthetic choices that they made that I really liked, is that they kept they kept the tone of Dracula consistent. Like, they never betrayed the character and made me feel like, wow, this is not Dracula. No, I just felt, oh, this is a different version of Dracula. But I appreciate it because they didn't shy away from like the drinking of the blood and the torn spirit of the character and just the gothic look of the entire thing. And one of the scenes that showed this the most would be that very first scene at the beginning where Vlad goes into the cave with these two other guys and there's the master vampire. It had some really creepy imagery, which gave me the thought, in that brief instance that scene was on screen, gave me the thought that even though this is PG-13, I don't think that you should bring really little kids because they're going to be easily frightened. And right when that thought happened, are you kidding me? The only last real complaint that I had with the movie is that there were certain parts where I felt it was just a tad bit melodramatic, especially with almost any scene between Dracula and his wife, and sometimes his son, but mainly with his wife. It felt like I was watching a soap opera. But besides that, this movie was somewhat of a surprise. Not completely, but I was going into this movie expecting just an okay, almost mediocre telling of Dracula, but I came out appreciating it more than I did. And the ending does smell sequel, but I'm not gonna lie, if they're gonna remain consistent with what this ending showed us, wouldn't mind seeing it. I really wouldn't. So for that, I'm actually going to give Dracula Untold a 7 out of 10, but it's actually a rather high 7 out of 10. I was pleasantly surprised. Wouldn't necessarily see it again, but if they do make a sequel, I wouldn't mind checking it out. So let me know what you guys thought of Dracula Untold. Let me know what you guys thought of my Batman impression there at the beginning. And thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Blah blah.